What kind of embarrassment are you to this family? That's what Warren Caldwell said to me. And then he grabbed my wrist and shoved me so hard I hit the door frame. Right there in front of 45 guests holding wine glasses on the night of his and Patrice's 30th wedding anniversary in a house I had cleaned from top to bottom since before the sun came up. I walked out the front door with nothing but a duffel bag and a bruise forming on my arm. I didn't know it then, but that shove was the last thing Warren Caldwell would ever do to me. Because before midnight, I'd be sitting in the parking lot of a gas station off Route 9 in Clarksburg, Georgia, across from a stranger who would say 6 words that would tear apart everything I thought I knew about my own life. Before I continue, please take a moment to like and subscribe. But only if this story resonates with you. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I read every single one. My name is Nora. Though for most of my life, I was made to answer to Claire. I'm 22 years old. Let me take you back to that Saturday, the day Warren and Patrice Caldwell celebrated 30 years of marriage, and the last day I ever spent under their roof. My alarm went off at 4:30 in the morning. I'd set it that early because Patrice had left a 3-page list on the kitchen table the night before. It was written in her loopy cursive on monogrammed notepaper, and reading it felt like being handed a prison sentence. Polish the hardwood floors in the front hallway. Steam the linen tablecloths. Arrange the centerpieces. White roses and eucalyptus. Each the florist had delivered the day before. Iron 45 cloth napkins and fold them into fans. Chill the white wine. Set out the good china, the stuff that only came out when other people were watching. Wash the crystal by hand. Slice the baguettes. Make the crab dip from scratch. And don't forget to put fresh soap in the guest bathroom. The Caldwell house sat on a long oak-lined street in Clarksburg, Georgia, a suburb about 40 minutes south of Atlanta. It was a 5-bedroom brick colonial with a circular driveway and a flower bed that Patrice hired a landscaper to maintain, but told her church friends she tended herself. The kitchen featured a double oven, granite countertops, and a sub-zero refrigerator that was always well-stocked. The dining room had a table that sat 14, near a chandelier that Warren had shipped in from a store in Savannah, and framed photos of the family on every wall. I wasn't in any of those photos. Or rather, I appeared in exactly 3 of them, all taken before I turned 10, when they still needed the pictures to look right for the people at church. My room was at the back of the house, past the laundry room, down a short hall that smelled like dryer sheets. It was the smallest room in the house by far, not quite a closet but not far off. A twin bed with a metal frame, a dresser with a drawer that stuck, and a single window that looked out at the side fence and the neighbor's air conditioning unit. I'd taped a piece of paper over the window in winter because the draft came right through the frame. Savannah's room was upstairs. Savannah was their biological daughter, 24. He's still living at home, still having her car washed by Warren's guy, still calling Patrice from the couch 2 rooms away instead of getting up to talk to her. She had a walk-in closet, a king bed, and one of those padded headboards that cost more than I made in 2 months. She'd never learned how to do laundry because that had always been my job. I had been working at a diner called Blue Kettle on the edge of Clarksburg for almost 2 years. Breakfast and lunch shifts mostly. I earned $12 an hour plus tips, and I kept my money in a sock inside my duffel bag because Warren knew my PIN and had made it very clear that the bank account in my name was, as he put it, a household resource. For their anniversary, I'd been saving since March, 4 months of tucking away $5 and $10 bills, $87 in total. I'd gone to a home goods store downtown and found a picture frame, solid dark wood, and had a photo printed and mounted inside it. The photo was one I had found in a box in the hall closet, a picture of Warren and Patrice on what looked like their honeymoon. They were young, laughing, standing in front of a fountain somewhere warm. I had it printed at the drugstore, mounted it in the frame, and wrote on a card in my best handwriting, Congratulations on 30 years. I wrapped it in brown paper because gift bags cost $4, and I needed every cent. I didn't know, standing in the kitchen at 4:30 in the morning with my hands already in soapy water, that the picture frame would be the last thing I ever gave those people. Warren came downstairs at 11, khakis with a crease sharp enough to cut glass, a blue button-down shirt, the loafers that cost more than my monthly food budget. He walked through the first floor the way he always did before a party, slow and deliberate, like a hotel inspector looking for a reason to fail you. He adjusted a centerpiece, ran his finger along the top of the bookshelf, stood in the doorway of the dining room and said, without looking at me, "The napkins on the left side are uneven. Do them again." Patrice came downstairs at noon in a cream-colored wrap dress and chandelier earrings. She had been to the salon that morning. Her hair was blown out, her nails freshly done in pale pink. She walked into the kitchen, lifted the lid on the crab dip, stirred it once, and set the lid back down without saying a word. Then she leaned toward Warren and said something in a low voice she knew I could hear. She got them something cheap again. Just be prepared. Savannah showed up last. She had been out the night before and slept until 10:30. She came downstairs in a new dress, strappy heels, and the kind of breezy energy that belongs to someone who has never had to worry about a single thing. She handed Warren and Patrice a card. Inside was a printed receipt for a weekend trip she had booked for the two of them, a boutique hotel in Charleston, spa included. The whole thing came to $1,200, charged to the credit card Warren kept loaded for her emergencies. Patrice held the card to her chest and said, "This is exactly what I wanted. This is what a daughter does for her parents." She pulled Savannah into a hug. Warren beamed. He didn't look at me. He never did when other people were watching. I was the one who polished things and refilled things and stayed out of the frame. When one of Patrice's friends from the garden club, a woman named Eloise, came into the kitchen while I was slicing bread and said, "Aren't you going to come join the party, sweetheart?" Patrice appeared from nowhere and smiled her closed-door smile and said, "Oh, Claire loves to help. It's her way of showing gratitude. You know how it is with kids from the system." I kept slicing bread. It happened during the gift portion of the evening. Warren and Patrice sat together at the head of the dining table, the room full of candlelight and the smell of white roses. 45 guests arranged around them, neighbors, colleagues from the accounting firm Warren managed, people from their church, a few of Savannah's friends who had been invited because they made the room look young and cheerful. Savannah stood behind her parents, filming on her phone. Patrice's sister Barbara sat at the far end of the table with her husband, watching everything with the particular attention of someone who would talk about it later. I came forward with the brown paper package. Warren took it and held it with one hand, like he was estimating the weight. I remember thinking he might nod, might say thank you, might give me the smallest acknowledgement that I had worked 4 months to give him something. He tore the paper. He looked at the frame. He turned it over once. Then he set it flat on the table, face down, and said, loud enough for the room to hear, "What kind of embarrassment are you to this family?" The conversation stopped. Forks paused. Someone put down a glass too carefully. I started to say I made it myself. I saved up. Saved up. He said it the way you say something that doesn't deserve a full sentence. You saved up? And this is what you came up with? He stood. His chair scraped back against the hardwood floor I had polished that morning. A complete waste of everyone's time. You've never once known how to do anything right. And then he grabbed my wrist and shoved me, hard, into the doorframe of the dining room. My shoulder hit the wood. I heard the crack before I felt it. Not broken, I'd know that later. Just bruised deep into the bone. A wine glass on the edge of the table rocked and fell. The sound of it hitting the floor was the only sound in the room for a long moment. Nobody moved. Patrice looked at her lap. Barbara looked at the wall. Savannah lowered her phone a fraction but did not stop filming. Two of Warren's colleagues from the firm stared at their plates. One person stood up. Dorothy Haynes, the woman who lived 3 houses down, who had brought a casserole when I had the flu 2 years ago, and was the only person in the whole neighborhood who had ever asked me how I was doing and waited for an answer. Dorothy was 67 years old and not a large woman, but she stood up and said clearly, "Warren, that was wrong." Warren said, "Sit down, Dorothy. This is a family matter." Dorothy sat down, but she did not look away from me, and I have never, not once, forgotten that. I stood in the doorway with my shoulder throbbing and the picture frame face down on the table, and I thought, very clearly, with like a voice from somewhere I hadn't known existed inside me, that is the last time. That is the absolute last time. I didn't go back into the dining room. I went to my room, pulled the duffel bag out from under the bed, and packed what I could. 2 shirts, 1 pair of jeans without a hole in the knee, my toothbrush, my phone charger. The envelope I had found inside a folder in the recycling bin 4 months earlier. The one with the state seal I had looked up online and not quite understood. And from inside the sock in my second dresser drawer, $312 in cash. Tips from Blue Kettle that I had been saving for exactly this kind of moment. The moment I had told myself would never come, but had always known was coming. $312. A duffel bag. A bruise already going purple on my shoulder. That was everything I had in the world. I walked through the hallway past the dining room. Through the gap in the doorway, I could see Warren laughing at something someone said. Glass in hand. The picture frame had been moved to a side table, face still down. Savannah was showing someone something on her phone. Probably the video. Patrice was standing at the window at the end of the hall. She saw me cross toward the front door. She reached out and pulled the curtain closed. Nobody said my name. Outside, the October air in Clarksburg hit me like a second blow. Georgia in October is still warm enough to confuse you, warm during the day and suddenly cold at night. And the street was dark and quiet the way streets in suburbs are dark and quiet. Like the silence is intentional, like nobody wants to know what's happening inside the houses. So I walked along Maple Ridge Drive with no destination, just away. Behind me, the sound of the party got quieter and quieter until it was only a low hum and then nothing at all. I had walked maybe a mile and a half, maybe 2, when headlights slowed behind me. A dark gray Ford Expedition, clean, Georgia plates, tinted windows. It rolled to a stop about 15 feet ahead of me on the shoulder. I should have run. Every part of me said run, but I was so tired. Not just that night. Tired. Tired in the way you get tired when you have been running your whole life and you can't remember a time when you weren't. So I stopped. And I waited to see what it was. The rear door opened. A man stepped out first. He was maybe 50, lean and tall, wearing a dark jacket over a plain gray shirt. His hair was dark with gray at the sides, and his eyes, even in the low light of the street, were unmistakable. They were brown with gold in them, wide set, the kind of eyes that look calm even when the person is not calm at all. And they were the same eyes I had seen in the mirror every single morning of my life. Behind him, a woman. Shorter, dark hair pulled back, wearing a blazer and carrying a leather folder as she had just come from an office. She held back a few steps, watching. Professional. The man's hands were not steady. I could see that even in the dark. He said, "I'm sorry if we frightened you." His voice broke slightly on the word sorry. "My name is Thomas Raines, and I believe I am your biological father." I stepped back. My heel caught the edge of the curb. "That's not possible," I said. "My biological parents gave me up." "That's what I was told." He said, "You were told wrong." He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a photograph. Small, worn soft at the edges from being handled so many times. A woman holding a toddler on a porch. The woman had dark brown hair and a wide, open smile that tilted just slightly to the right. The toddler had brown eyes with gold in them and a gap between her front teeth. "Her name was Lily," he said. "She was your mother. She died when you were not quite 2 years old. A car accident on I-285, a Tuesday morning in November. She was killed before the paramedics arrived. I have spent every year since then trying to find you." I looked at the photograph, then at him, then at the photograph again. The woman in it had my nose, the same slight tilt of the head. Looking at her felt like finding a room in a house you've lived in your whole life that you never knew was there. The woman in the blazer spoke. "My name is Andrea Marsh," she said. "I'm Mr. Raines's attorney, family law. We're not here to pressure you or take you anywhere you don't want to go. We have been monitoring the situation through legal channels for several months. Tonight, when our investigator confirmed you had left the residence, we decided to approach." "You were watching the house?" I said. Andrea nodded. "The anniversary party is a large gathering. It was the clearest opportunity to visually confirm your identity in a safe setting." She paused. "We also saw what happened before you left." I touched my shoulder without thinking. Thomas Raines looked at the way my hand moved to that spot, and something in his expression changed very quietly, like a light going out in a room behind a window. You couldn't see it directly. You could only see the shadow of it. We sat in the back of the expedition, Thomas on one side, me on the other, Andrea in the front passenger seat with her folder open. The engine was running, the heat on low. It was the warmest I had been since before sunrise. Thomas told me the story the way a man tells a story he has told himself 10,000 times and still hasn't gotten used to. Lily died on a Tuesday morning in November, 12 days after my second birthday. She had been driving to a job interview. A pickup truck ran a red light. She died at the scene. Thomas was at work. He got the call from the hospital. "I was at home with a neighbor," he said, "a woman named Gwen who watched me during the days. Now when the police came, and Thomas was not reachable for several hours, Child Protective Services was called. Standard procedure for an unaccompanied minor. I was taken into emergency foster care. That part I understood. What I didn't understand was what came next. When I got to the hospital and then to the CPS office, Thomas said, they told me there was a form, a voluntary surrender of parental rights. They had a document with my signature on it. They said I had signed it the morning after Lily died." He stopped. Then he said, "I did not sign anything. I was barely conscious that morning. I was in the hospital waiting room. I couldn't have told you my own address, but the court had a piece of paper with my name on it, and that was enough." By the time Thomas hired a lawyer and tried to challenge the ruling, the adoption had already been finalized. The case file had been sealed. His daughter had a new name and a new family in Georgia, and he was not permitted to know where. "So I hired investigators," he said. "Every year. I spent." He stopped. "The amount doesn't matter. I would have spent everything I had." His voice was steady when he talked about money. It was not steady when he said everything. I looked at Andrea. I said, "The social worker who handled the case. Did someone pay them?" Andrea closed her folder. "That's what we intend to prove." The expedition was still sitting on the shoulder of Route 9, the hazard lights blinking slowly orange in the dark. I had my duffel bag in my lap, holding the handles the way I used to hold my backpack on the first day of school every year. Tight, like letting go meant losing something. And I told them about the envelope. 4 months earlier, in June, Warren had decided that the small room off the laundry was going to become a home gym. That meant my things needed to move to a corner of the laundry room itself. He threw what he considered my non-essential belongings into a garbage bag and left it by the back door for trash pickup. I went through the bag that same night, the way you learn to go through everything when nothing you own is ever fully yours. You check. You save what you can. At the bottom, under old school notebooks and a plastic bag of craft supplies, I found a manila envelope that had been folded in half and tucked inside a folder. The folder had a label in Warren's handwriting that said, "Adoption paperwork filed." The envelope had the seal of the Georgia Division of Family and Children Services on the upper left corner. Inside was a single document, partially blacked out with marker, with a heading that said, Title IV, Adoption Assistance Payment Record, and across the top in plain type, Claire Ann Caldwell. I didn't know what Title IV meant. I'd looked it up on my phone that night and read through the government website 3 times, trying to understand it. Something about federal funding for foster and adoptive placements. Something about monthly payments. I had folded the document back up and put it in my duffel bag and carried it with me for 4 months without fully understanding what it meant, but knowing, somewhere deep and wordless, that it meant something. I pulled it out now and handed it to Andrea. She unfolded it under the dome light, and I watched her face change. Not in a dramatic way. The way a person's face changes when the last piece of something clicks into place, and you realize the picture is worse than you thought. "This is an adoption assistance disbursement record," she said. "The state of Georgia has been paying Warren and Patrice Caldwell $840 per month for your care and support for approximately 19 years. She looked at me directly. "That totals somewhere in the range of $190,000. She let that sit for a moment. Then she said, "How much of that money did you ever see?" I thought about the metal bed frame, the stuck dresser drawer, the window with the paper taped over it to block the draft, the sock where I kept my cash because Warren knew my PIN. I said, "None of it." Thomas turned toward the window, and in the reflection I could see his jaw working, pressing shut. The dome light made the car feel smaller than it was. "All those years," I said, almost to myself. "He called me a drain on this family. He told me I should be grateful they took me in. But I wasn't a drain. I was an income." Andrea drove us to a Hampton Inn off the interstate, not back to Maple Ridge Drive, not to a shelter. Just somewhere clean and quiet and safe. Thomas checked in under his name. Separate rooms with a connecting door. My room had a window that looked out onto the parking lot and the tree line beyond it, and the first thing I did was walk to that window and stand there for a while, just looking at the orange parking lot lights and the dark shapes of the trees. The bed had white sheets that smelled like clean laundry. Not mildew, not the faint dampness that had followed the blanket in my room at Maple Ridge Drive, no matter how many times I washed it. I sat on the edge of the bed and let myself feel the strangeness of the room, the cleanness of it. The silence wasn't tense. The memories came the way water fills a basement. Slow at first. Then all at once. I started cooking family meals when I was 9. By 11, I was doing all the laundry. By 12, the grocery shopping too, walking 40 minutes to the Kroger because Warren wouldn't take me. Savannah got a Honda Civic for her 16th birthday. I got a longer chore list. Warren never let me keep my own documents. No birth certificate, no social security card, no state ID. I controlled. When I asked about a driver's license at 17, Warren said, "You don't need one. You're not going anywhere." At the time, I had half believed him. Now I understood he had designed it that way. I kept turning one question over. If Warren resented me so much, why keep me? Why not send me back into the system? $840 a month? That's why. Have you ever been in a situation where someone treated you like you were worthless but refused to let you go? Held onto you with both hands while telling you with their words that you were nothing? If you've felt that, you already understand the math of it. The way some people calculate love? Patrice's voice came back to me, smooth and cool as river water. "Gratitude, Claire. It's not that much to ask. Is it really so hard?" "No, Patrice. What was hard was realizing I had been grateful to people who were running a tab on me. Let me go back 3 weeks before the anniversary party. Because the truth is, Warren had already shown me what he was. I had just been too trained to name it. It was a Monday evening. Warren called me into his study. Dark wood shelves, a judgment seat desk, a leather chair he sat in like it gave him authority. He had a folder open on the desk. "Sit down," he said. He slid a document across the desk. About 15 pages, dense type, a green sticky tab at the signature line. "This is a voluntary continuation agreement," he said. "It states that you acknowledge you are not prepared to live independently at this time and that you agree to remain under my guardianship for up to 24 months. I picked it up. Most of it was legal language I could only half understand, but on page 5 was a clause I understood perfectly. It authorized Warren to continue receiving and administering all state and federal benefits associated with my care during the continuation period. He wanted my adult signature so he could keep the government money flowing after I aged out of the system. "Why do I need to sign this?" I asked. Warren leaned back. "Because without this household, you have nothing. No degree, no work history that amounts to anything, no identification. So you're going to sign this agreement before our anniversary. Consider it your contribution to this family. Your gift." I didn't sign. I said I needed time. Warren said nothing. Just put the folder back in the desk drawer slowly, the way you close something you plan to return to. That was why he shoved me at the party. It had nothing to do with the picture frame, and it was because I had quietly told him no for the first time in my life. And Warren Caldwell did not accept no, not from me. The next morning at the Hampton Inn, I woke at 4:30. My body had not gotten the message that there was no list on the kitchen table. My heart was already going fast before my eyes were open, my mind already running through tasks before I could stop it. Then I remembered. There was no table. There was no list. I lay still for a while and looked at the ceiling. A knock at the connecting door. Thomas, already dressed, was standing in the doorway with 2 coffees from the lobby. He set one on the dresser and sat in the chair by the window. Not close, not crowding me, just present. The way you sit with someone when you are very aware that moving too fast might break something fragile. Andrea arrived at 8:30 with a bag from Target. Inside, a pair of dark jeans still with the tag on, a soft green sweater, and a plain gray long-sleeve shirt. "Something clean," she said, putting the bag on the bed. "Nothing more, nothing less." I took them to the bathroom, changed, and looked at myself in the mirror for a long time. It was the first time in my life that I was wearing something nobody had worn before me, something bought new and chosen for me. When I came out, Thomas's eyes went red at the edges. He didn't cry. He just nodded once and said, "Lily used to do that. Stand in front of the mirror for a long time, like she was deciding something." I sat on the edge of the bed and said what I had been thinking since 2 in the morning. I need a DNA test. Not the photograph, not your word, the science. If you're who you say you are, I'll have proof. And if you're not, I need to know that too. Thomas didn't flinch. He said, "Of course. Andrea has already found a certified lab in Atlanta. We can go today if you want." No hesitation, no hurt feelings, no guilt trip about how he'd been searching for years. And couldn't I just trust him? Just, of course. I had spent 22 years in a house where asking a question was treated as an act of disrespect. And here was a man who answered like questions were the most ordinary thing in the world. "I've done what I was told my whole life," I said. "I'm not going to start trusting people just because I have nowhere else to go. If I trust you, it'll be because I decided to, not because I'm scared." Thomas set down his coffee and looked at me and said, "That is exactly how it should be." The lab was a 2-story building near the Emory campus in Atlanta, clean and bright with fluorescent lights, and the quiet, purposeful sound of a place where things are measured carefully. A technician in pale blue scrubs swabbed the inside of my cheek, then Thomas's. She labeled the vials and told us the results took 3 to 5 business days. 5 days. I had been waiting 22 years to know who I was. 5 more felt like holding my breath at the bottom of a pool. While we waited, Thomas brought things to the hotel, not presents, pieces. A photo album with a dark green cover, soft from being handled. Lily is at a picnic, laughing at something out of frame. Lily and Thomas are in front of a small white house with a covered porch indicator. Lily is holding a newborn in a hospital gown, looking exhausted and radiant at the same time. The baby had brown eyes with gold in them and a faint gap between her front teeth. "That's you," Thomas said. "2 days old. That's the porch you came home to." I studied each photograph the way you study a map of a place you've always wanted to go. My mother's hands, how she held a mug, the way she tilted her chin when she was laughing, the shape of her nose, which was my nose. "She's beautiful," I said. "You look just like her," he said, "especially the eyes." On the 5th day, Andrea called. I was sitting on the hotel bed with the album open to a photo of Lily blowing out birthday candles. 31 of them. She would have been 53 this year. My phone rang, and I answered it, and Andrea said, 99.997% probability of paternity. "It's confirmed, Nora. Thomas Raines is your biological father." I didn't say anything for a long moment. I just held the phone and looked at the photograph and felt something shift inside my chest. Not crack, not shatter. Open. The way a window opens is when someone reaches across and lifts the latch from the other side. 99.997%. A number. But what it meant to me was that for the first time in 22 years, I had proof that I had not been a mistake. Proof that someone had looked for me. Proof that the story I had been told about myself was a lie. Andrea's voice came back. Steady. Clear. Now we have enough to move forward. The next step is the family court. Here's what I learned later, from the court filings and from the testimony that came out in pieces over the following weeks. The morning after the anniversary party, Warren called the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office and reported me missing. He told the responding deputy that I was unstable, that I had a history of erratic behavior, and that I could not be trusted to make decisions for myself. The deputy looked up my information and told Warren what he did not want to hear. I was 22 years old, a legal adult. If I had left voluntarily, there was no missing person case to file. Warren told the deputy I had not left voluntarily, that I lacked the mental capacity to consent to leaving. The deputy asked if Warren had documentation of any guardianship order or medical evaluation. Warren did not, because there was none. Because I was not unstable. I was just controlled. That same night, according to the text messages Patrice would eventually hand over to Andrea's team, Warren paced the house for hours after the guests left. Patrice sat at the kitchen table typing what he told her to type. "If that girl gets to a lawyer or to anyone at DFCS, it's over. Everything. Get the original adoption file out of the safe. All of it. Tonight." Patrice texted back. "She doesn't know anything." Warren's reply. "She doesn't. But someone might show her where to look." He had always known. That was the thing I understood later, reading the transcripts. Warren had always carried the knowledge of what he had done the way some people carry a bad debt. Always managing it. Always aware that the whole structure depended on nobody asking the right questions. He was not afraid of losing me. He was afraid of what I would find out once I was free. And what he did not know was that the man he should have been afraid of had spent 20 years looking for his daughter and was now sitting in a Hampton Inn 12 miles away, assembling a file 3 inches thick. Andrea laid out the documents on the hotel conference table 2 days before the hearing. Organized, every piece in its place. Stack 1, DNA results, 99.997%, irrefutable. Stack 2, forensic analysis from Dr. Charles Whitby. He had compared the signature on the voluntary surrender of parental rights against 19 known handwriting samples from Thomas. His conclusion: the pen pressure is inconsistent with the subject's signature profile. The letter formation in the surname does not match any known exemplar. Thomas did not sign that document. Stack 3. The Title IV e-payment records. $840 per month, 228 months, totaling $191,520. Sandra Price's audit. No medical records after age 13, no identification in my possession, living space inadequate for a foster placement, no documented access to assistance funds. Stack 4. Sandra's full neglect findings. Stack 5. A sworn statement from Dorothy Haynes. She had contacted Andrea's office the week after the party without being asked. Her statement described 12 years of watching one child get everything and another get nothing, and the night she stood up and was told to sit down. "Do I have to speak in court?" I asked. "Only if you want to," Andrea said. "The documents make the case." Thomas spoke once from the end of the table. Whatever happens in that courtroom, you're already free." I thought, not quite yet. But soon, 2 days before the hearing, a letter arrived at the front desk of the Hampton Inn, addressed to Claire Ann Caldwell. Not Nora Raines, because Warren still refused to accept that I had any name other than the one he'd given me. Inside was a single page on Caldwell Financial Services letterhead, Warren's signature at the bottom. Beside the letter, a photograph. Me, at age 4, sitting on a front porch with a stuffed rabbit in my arms, squinting into the sunlight. Warren was somewhere off to the side. You could see his shadow. The letter read, "Claire, I don't know who this man is or what he has told you, but he is not your family. We are. We have given you everything for 19 years. A home, food, stability. Whatever difficulties we have had, yet they are nothing compared to what your life would have looked like without us. Come home. I forgive you for the way you left. This can all be resolved quietly. Dad." I read it 3 times. The word forgive hit each time differently. First, like something opening. Then, like something locking. Then, like a hand closing around my wrist. He forgave me for leaving after he shoved me into a doorframe in front of 45 people. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed and felt the room tilt. Not the way a room tilts when something is wrong. The way it tilts when something very old and very heavy is beginning to shift. 19 years of being told I owed them. Of being told my whole existence in that house was a gift they were giving me. That voice, the one that had been in my head my whole life, was quiet, but it was still there. What if this is the trick? What if Thomas is using you the same way Warren did? I looked at Thomas, who was reading in the chair by the window, a book about baseball history that he'd been carrying around since the first day, and I said it out loud. "How do I know you're not the same as him? How do I know you don't want something too?" He put the book down. He didn't look hurt. He looked like a man who had been expecting that question and had been thinking about how to answer it honestly. "You don't," he said. "Not yet. I can't give you certainty that fast. The DNA doesn't lie. The documents don't lie. The court will establish what the law requires. All I'm asking is that you let the evidence speak for itself. You don't have to trust me. You just have to be willing to see what the facts say." He picked his book back up. That, the not pushing, each and the giving me room, the total absence of guilt, was the most frightening thing he had done, because it was nothing like anything I had known. That night, I couldn't sleep, so I did what I had always done when the world stopped making sense. I looked at the evidence. I put Warren's letter on one side of the small desk in my hotel room. On the other side, I put the Title 4E document from my duffel bag. 2 pieces of paper. One from the state of Georgia confirming that Warren Caldwell had been paid $840 a month to take care of me. One from Warren claiming he had given me everything and asking me to come home. If Warren loved me, why did I sleep in a room that had been a storage space? Why did he know my PIN and keep my cash in a household resource? Why had I never seen my own birth certificate? Why was the agreement he'd tried to make me sign designed to keep the money coming, not to keep me safe? The answer was in the math. It had always been in the math. The question wasn't why Warren had treated me the way he did. The question was why I had spent so long looking for a different answer. Warren Caldwell didn't love me. Warren Caldwell invoiced me. And somewhere along the way, I had confused the invoice for love because it was the only love I had. I called Andrea at 11:45. She picked up on the second ring. "I'm going to court," I said. "Not because I'm sure about everything, but because I deserve to know the truth. I've earned that." "Whatever the truth is," she said, "that is all we need." The next afternoon, Sandra Price came to the hotel. She was the state-assigned social worker, early 40s, precise in her speech. I with a small notebook she kept in her blazer pocket. She asked me to walk her through my living conditions growing up. I did. The room, the duties, the missing documents, the money I was never allowed to touch, the isolation. She wrote everything down, and when I finished, she didn't say she was sorry or that she couldn't imagine. She said, "What you are describing, if it's corroborated by the records we've already obtained, constitutes chronic neglect. And the financial component constitutes systematic misuse of federal adoption assistance funds." Then she said, more quietly, "This isn't only about your adoption being fraudulent, Nora. This is about a system that had obligations to you and didn't meet them. That matters regardless of what happens with the Caldwells." "I'm not choosing Thomas over Warren," I told myself after Sandra left. "I'm choosing the truth over the lie I've been living inside." I didn't see this part directly. I learned it from Sandra's report and from testimony that came out during the hearing. But I'm going to tell it because you need to understand who Warren Caldwell believed he was when he walked into that courtroom. The night before the hearing, Warren sat at the kitchen table at Maple Ridge Drive and rehearsed his testimony with his attorney. Not a specialist, a general practice lawyer from a strip mall office near the post office who had never handled an adoption fraud case in his life. "I have the original decree," Warren said, "signed by a judge, certified by the court. You can't undo 20 years. His lawyer said. "We'll lean into the length of time. Judges are reluctant to overturn settled adoptions." Patrice sat across from them. She said, "What if they bring up the payments? What if someone audits where the money went?" Warren said they audit low-income families, not families like us. Savannah came through the kitchen on her way to the refrigerator and said, without looking up from her phone, "If Claire doesn't come back, can I finally redo that back room?" Warren didn't answer. He was already composing the version of himself he planned to present to the judge. The generous man, the stable provider, the upstanding member of the community who had taken in a child nobody else wanted and given her a home for 19 years. He did not know that the judge would be looking at 3 inches of documents telling a completely different story. He did not know that the quiet girl he had spent 19 years teaching to stay small had found her voice and was standing 30 feet away getting a good night's sleep. Warren walked into that courtroom the way a man walks into a room he believes belongs to him. He was about to learn what it felt like when it didn't. The morning of the hearing, Andrea turned the hotel's business room into a command center. She went through the case with me in order, calm and precise, like someone who had walked this road before. First, the DNA, then the forensic analysis, then the financial records, then Sandra Price's report, then Dorothy's testimony. She looked at me when she finished and said, "You don't have to say anything in court. The case is built." "I know," I said, but I want to. She nodded once. I've set time aside. Thomas said just one thing from the end of the table. No matter what the judge decides today, the truth is already out. Nobody can put it back. That afternoon, Thomas took me to a small boutique near the courthouse. He said, "You should walk into that room looking exactly who you are, someone who has a right to be heard." I tried on a charcoal blazer over a white button-down, dark slacks, stood in the fitting room mirror and looked at the person looking back. Shoulders straight, eyes clear. Someone who sat at the table rather than served it. "Your mother used to do that," Thomas said when I came out. Stand in front of the mirror for a long time, like she was settling something. I hadn't smiled, but I understood what he meant. Something was settling. On the drive back, he pointed to a small white house on a quiet street in Decatur. Covered porch, rocking chair. "That's the house," he said. "The one in the photos." I couldn't sell it. I looked at it through the window and felt something I didn't have a word for yet. A recognition that lived in the body before it reached the mind. That night, I sat on the hotel bed with a notebook from CVS across the street and wrote one line for myself. Whatever happens tomorrow, I will never answer to a name that isn't mine. I will never be grateful for being used. I will never shrink to fit a space someone else decided I deserved. I slept for 4 hours. I dreamed of a covered porch and a woman with my nose laughing at something I couldn't hear. Fulton County Superior Court, Atlanta, Georgia. A Tuesday morning in late October. The building was old and federal-looking, with stone columns out front, floors inside that echoed every step. I arrived at 8:15 with Thomas on my left and Andrea on my right. Sandra Price behind us carrying a banker's box. Charcoal blazer, white shirt, hair pulled back. No jewelry. My hands were steady. Warren arrived at 8:30. Gray suit, gold cufflinks. Patrice is on his arm in a navy dress. Savannah was a step behind, dressed too casually for court, looking at her phone and then thinking better of it and putting it away. Warren's attorney carried a single manila folder. Warren carried his chin at the angle of a man who expected to win before the opening statement. Then he saw us. His eyes went to me first, registered the blazer, the posture, the absence of the girl who used to look at the floor when he spoke. Then they moved to Thomas, then to Andrea, then to Sandra's banker's box. Warren's face didn't break. It recalculated. I had seen that look before. It was the look he got when a variable he thought he'd controlled turned out to be something else entirely. Patrice's hand tightened on his arm. Savannah put her phone all the way in her bag. Warren and I made eye contact across the marble hallway. For the first time in my life, I did not look down. The bailiff opened the courtroom doors. Both parties entered. The judge was the Honorable Marcus Webb, a man in his mid-60s with a patient, deliberate manner and reading glasses he wore low on his nose. He called the case, and Andrea stood. "Your Honor," she said, "we are here today to present evidence that the adoption of the minor formerly known as Nora Raines, placed under the name Claire Ann Caldwell 19 years ago, was obtained through fraud. Specifically, through the forgery of the biological father's consent to terminate his parental rights, and through a financial payment made to the case-assigned social worker to facilitate that forgery." She introduced the DNA evidence first, the lab technician's affidavit, the chain of custody documentation, and the number. Judge Webb read the summary, adjusted his glasses, and set it aside with a small nod. Then she introduced the forensic analysis. Dr. Whitby's report, 41 pages, with conclusions on the final page. Warren's attorney stood. "Your Honor, my client holds a court-certified adoption decree that is nearly 20 years old. Petitioner's counsel is attempting to relitigate a settled matter based on the opinion of a hired document examiner." Andrea did not turn around. "Your Honor, a decree obtained through a forged consent is not a settled matter. It is a concealed one. We are here to establish what actually occurred. In the gallery, Dorothy Haynes sat in the second row in a blue cardigan, hands folded in her lap. A woman from Warren's church sat beside her and would not stop looking at her own hands. A man with a small notebook, who I later learned was a reporter from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, sat near the back. His pen moved steadily. Judge Webb looked at Warren's attorney over his glasses. The court will hear the petitioner's full presentation. Continue, Ms. Marsh. Andrea moved to the financial records. She projected the Title IV-E disbursement summary onto the screen at the front of the courtroom. The same document I had found in the garbage bag 4 months ago. Column after column of monthly payments. 19 years of them. Mr. Caldwell, Andrea said, the state of Georgia paid your household $840 per month in federal adoption assistance for the care of the child placed with you. That totals approximately $191,000. Can you tell the court how those funds were allocated toward her welfare? Warren sat straight. He said, everything went to her care. 19 years of housing, food, and clothing. That's not free. Andrea nodded as if she had expected that answer, which she had. She called Sandra Price. Sandra took the stand with her report in a plain folder and spoke without inflection or editorializing. The child's living space was a converted storage area adjacent to the laundry room, approximately 55 square feet, with no exterior window and inadequate ventilation. The mattress showed wear and deterioration inconsistent with normal residential use. There were no medical records in the child's name after age 13, no dental records after age 12, no immunization records after middle school. The child had no personal identification documents in her possession. She had no documented access to her own case file. She did not know her own Social Security number. Sandra looked at the judge. In my assessment, Your Honor, the living conditions and documentation failures described are not consistent with the purpose of adoption assistance funds. They are consistent with neglect. Patrice had been very still through the whole proceeding. Now she began to cry, quietly at first, then louder. It was a particular kind of crying. I recognized it. A performed crying. It's the kind that says, look at how I'm suffering so you don't look at what I did. Warren put his hand over hers and stared straight ahead with the expression of a man being wrongly accused. Then Dorothy Haynes took the stand. She sat down, adjusted the microphone, and folded her hands. She spoke the way she had always spoken, plainly, without decoration. I have lived 3 houses from the Caldwell family for 12 years, she said. I have watched that girl mow their lawn in August heat while the other daughter sat inside. I have watched her rake leaves while Savannah was at the mall. I have never once seen her sit at the Caldwell table during a dinner party. She paused. On the night of October 14th, during the Caldwell's 30th anniversary celebration, I witnessed Warren Caldwell grab that young woman's wrist and force her into a doorframe with enough force to cause visible injury. She had given him a gift she had saved for months to buy. I stood up because what he did was wrong. He told me to sit down. I am not sitting down today. The courtroom was very quiet. Andrea let the silence hold for a moment. Then she turned back to Warren. Mr. Caldwell, do you know a woman named Rita Goss? Warren's expression did not shift. No. Andrea produced a photograph. Color. Printed on photo paper. 2 people standing at a folding table at what appeared to be a church picnic. Paper plates, folding chairs, and a banner in the background that read, First Methodist Community Day. One of the people was Warren, about 15 years younger, wearing a polo shirt and holding a cup of sweet tea. The other was a thin woman with short hair and a lanyard that read, Georgia DFCS. This photograph was taken at the First Methodist Community Day in Clarksburg in May 2002, Andrea said. The woman beside you is Rita Goss, the social worker assigned to the case of the minor placed as Claire Caldwell. Do you maintain you don't know her? Warren said. I may have met her in passing. Community events are large. I don't keep track of every person I meet at church functions. You kept track of her well enough to send her $6,000. Andrea placed a document on the projector. A bank statement. Warren's personal checking account. November 2003. An outgoing wire transfer. Recipient. Rita A. Goss. Amount. $6,000. Can you explain this payment? Warren turned to his lawyer. His lawyer was looking at the table. That was a personal matter. A loan. A private arrangement. A personal loan to the social worker assigned to your daughter's case, wired directly to her personal account 3 weeks before the adoption was finalized. Warren stood up. His voice went high, the way it had always gone high when he was losing control of a situation. Everything I did for that girl. 19 years of putting a roof over her head and food on her plate. And now I'm standing here being treated like a criminal because some con man showed up with a DNA test? I gave that girl everything. Mr. Caldwell. Judge Webb's voice was low and final. Sit down. He sat, but the words were already in the room. Andrea turned to the judge with the stillness of someone who had just had her work done for her. Your Honor, I would ask the court to note the respondent's characterization of his 19-year guardianship as something he gave that girl. That framing tells this court everything it needs to know about the nature of the relationship. Parenting is not a transaction. It is not a debt to be collected. She looked at me. I had told her the night before, I want to speak. The case doesn't need it. But I do. Your Honor, Andrea said, the petitioner requests the court's permission for a brief statement. Judge Webb nodded. You may proceed. I stood. Charcoal blazer, white shirt, hands at my sides. I looked at the judge, not at Warren. This was not for Warren. Your Honor, I'm not here for revenge. I said it and let it sit there. I'm here because for 22 years I didn't know who I was. I didn't know my own name. I didn't know what my mother looked like. I didn't know that someone was searching for me. I didn't know that the document that put me in that house was built on a forged signature. I paused. Mr. Caldwell said he gave me everything. I want to tell the court what everything looked like. A storage room with no windows. A mattress that came from someone's trash. No doctor after age 13. No identification I was allowed to hold. No birth certificate I was allowed to be seen. I learned my own social security number 3 weeks ago. I worked in that house from the time I was 9. Cooking, cleaning, laundry, groceries. I was told every day that I should be grateful. That, without them, I was nothing. That nothing I did was ever quite right. My voice did not break. I had decided that. He shoved me at that party because I gave him a gift I had saved 4 months to buy. But the truth is, he shoved me because I had refused to sign a paper giving him continued control over my life after I turned 21. That was what I was to that family. Not a daughter, not a person. A line item. I looked at the judge. I'm not asking this court to punish Warren Caldwell. I'm asking this court to say the truth out loud. Because I deserve at least that. Every child in a placement anywhere in this country deserves at least that. I sat down. The room was silent. The way a room is silent when something has settled that cannot be unsettled. Dorothy Haynes was crying in the gallery. The real kind. The courthouse reporter had stopped writing and was just looking at me. Thomas sat at the plaintiff's table with his hands folded on the surface and his knuckles white. Have you ever held something inside for so long that when you finally say it out loud, you're amazed by how small it sounds? Just a few sentences. Just the plain truth. And you realize all that weight was never yours to carry. If you know what that feels like, tell me in the comments. I think that feeling doesn't need much explanation to the people who've been there. Then something happened that nobody in that courtroom was expecting. Patrice stood up. Not from the witness stand. She had not been called. She stood from the respondent's bench, smoothed the front of her navy dress the way she smoothed everything when she was trying to look composed, and said, in a voice that was already coming apart, "Your Honor, I have something I have to say." Warren grabbed her wrist. Not shoved her, not yet, but grabbed. The reflex of a man who needed to control the room. "Patrice," he said quietly, "don't." She pulled free. It was the first time I had ever seen her pull free of anything. "I wrote the check," she said, "to Rita Goss. Warren told me it was an expediting fee for the paperwork. I wrote it and I knew what I was writing it for. I told myself it was for the best, that we were giving a child a home, that the process was just slow, and we were helping it along." She stopped. Her mascara was tracking down her face, really this time, not performed. I watched him treat that girl as a servant for 19 years, and I didn't say anything. I told myself it was good for her. Responsibility, gratitude. I told myself a lot of things. Her voice cracked on the last word. I watched him grab her at our party, and I looked down at my plate. And I have to live with that. But I will not stand in this courtroom and let him go to prison alone for something I was part of. Warren went the color of a brick wall. He said, "She's lying. She's confused. She's trying to protect herself." "I am trying to protect myself," Patrice said, "because I have been protecting you for 20 years, Warren, and I am done." Judge Webb let her finish. Then he looked at Warren's attorney, who was already sitting back from the table like he was trying to create physical distance from his own client. "Mr. Caldwell," the judge said, "one more outburst and I will hold you in contempt. Is that clear?" Warren sat very still. For the first time in my life watching him, I saw fear. Not the performed authority of a man who knows the room is his. Real fear, the kind that comes when a structure you have spent 20 years building reveals that its foundation was always a lie. Judge Webb reviewed the documents for 14 minutes. I counted. The old clock on the courtroom wall had a second hand that ticked, not swept, and I counted every rotation. When he looked up, he spoke to me first. "Miss Raines." He used that name, and something inside me went very still. "The court has reviewed the petition, the DNA evidence, the forensic signature analysis, the financial records, the testimony of the state social worker and the neighbor witness, the statement made voluntarily by Patrice Caldwell, and the documentary history of this case." He removed his glasses. "The evidence is unambiguous. The voluntary surrender of parental rights filed in November 2003 bears a signature that has been certified by forensic analysis as fraudulent. The biological father, Thomas Raines, did not consent to the termination of his parental rights. The adoption that followed was built on that forgery and facilitated by a direct payment to the case-assigned social worker." He turned to Warren. Warren was sitting upright, ties still knotted, the posture of authority holding on by muscle memory even as everything else fell away. "It is the ruling of this court that the adoption of Nora Raines, styled as Claire Ann Caldwell, is declared void ab initio. The adoption is annulled in its entirety." Patrice made a sound that was not quite a word. Furthermore, when the court orders Warren and Patrice Caldwell to make full restitution of all Title IV adoption assistance funds received, totaling $191,520 to the state of Georgia. Warren's attorney had stopped taking notes. "Finally, this court is referring the matter to the Fulton County District Attorney's Office for investigation of potential criminal charges, including but not limited to forgery in violation of Georgia Code. Section 16-9-1, fraud in connection with public assistance benefits, and child neglect under Georgia Code Section 16-12-1. The judge set down his papers. "The child's legal name is restored to Nora Lily Raines, effective immediately." The gavel came down. That sound, one clean knock of wood on wood, louder than anything that had ever happened to me, louder than the shove. louder than 19 years of being told to be grateful. Louder than every morning I woke up at 4:30 because my body had learned to brace. It sounded like a door opening from the inside. In the gallery, Dorothy Haynes pressed both hands over her mouth. The churchwoman beside her looked at the floor. The courthouse reporter closed his notebook and looked at me with an expression that I didn't have a word for, but have never forgotten. Warren sat without moving. His attorney was already packing the single manila folder. The hallway outside smelled like floor polish and old heating, and the particular kind of quiet that lives in public buildings. I was walking toward the exit with Thomas on one side and Andrea on the other when I heard footsteps behind me. Fast, uneven. Savannah. Her makeup was ruined. Foundation patchy where she'd wiped at it. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her, and she had always been someone who took up space without thinking about it. She said, "Wait. Claire, wait." I stopped and turned. "I didn't know," she said. She was breathing fast. "About the money, the payments. I thought it was just. I thought Dad's salary was." She stopped. She couldn't finish the sentence. I understood why. The sentence ended with "I thought money came from his work, not from you." And saying it out loud would make real something she wasn't prepared for. I looked at her. The girl who had gotten everything without ever asking why. The girl who had been in the next room while I cooked dinner for 10 years. The girl who had filmed her father shove me and not step forward. The girl who had asked if she could redo my room into a storage space. Part of me wanted to tell her everything. Part of me wanted to walk away without turning around. But standing in that courthouse hallway with my name restored and my father beside me, what I felt was not rage. It was clarity. "I hope you figure out who you are without his money," I said. "I really do. But that's your work to do, not mine." She nodded once. Slowly, I saw something move across her face. Not guilty yet. But the thing that comes just before guilt. The moment when the story you've been telling yourself starts to show its cracks. Thomas held the courthouse door open. Andrea was already in the car. I walked toward them, and I did not look back. Not because I was angry, because for the first time in my life, I had somewhere to walk toward. Not just away from something, toward something. Warren was at the bottom of the courthouse steps. He had his jacket unbuttoned and his tie loosened, and he looked diminished in a way that had nothing to do with how he was dressed. Something in the structure of him had given. Patrice was in their Buick at the curb, her forehead on the steering wheel, engine running. I was halfway down the steps when he said it. "Claire." I stopped. I turned. He was looking at me the way he had always looked at me, like I was something he owned and could not quite determine the value of. But underneath that, something different. Something that might have been fear if Warren Caldwell had been the kind of man who admitted to being afraid. "After everything I did for you," he said, 19 years under my roof. And this is what I get. I stood on the courthouse steps in my charcoal blazer with the October sun on my shoulders, and I felt, for the first time, the full weight of what he had just said. Not anger, not sadness, recognition. Because even now, even with the judge's ruling still ringing in my ears, even with forensic proof that he had built 20 years of his life on a stolen child, Warren Caldwell believed he was owed something. "My name is Nora," I said. "And you didn't do anything for me. You did everything to me. And now it's done." I turned and walked down the remaining steps. Thomas was waiting by the car, the door held open. He didn't say anything. He had been waiting 20 years to hold that door, and he didn't need to say a word about it. I got in. The door closed. Through the tinted window, I watched Warren Caldwell stand alone at the bottom of the courthouse steps, jacket open, watching the car pull away. He had spent 19 years collecting a government check for a child that was never his to keep. Now the debt was his. 6 months later, This is where I am. I live in Atlanta now, in a studio apartment in East Atlanta Village. It's small, but it's mine. Tall windows on the east side fill the room with morning light. The first thing I did when I moved in was stand at those windows for a long time, just looking at the light. I spent 19 years in a room without a real window. Now I need to see the sky when I wake up. I got my GED in December, my first attempt. I'm now enrolled in a culinary program at Atlanta Technical College. I know how that sounds. Warren made me cook every meal for that family for years. And now I'm choosing to cook. But that's the whole point. The difference between something done to you and something you decide to do. The pan is the same. The choice is everything. Thomas and I have dinner every Sunday. He's not much of a cook. Chicken that's slightly too dry, rice that clumps a little. But he makes it himself. He sets the table. He asks about my week. And he actually listens. We're still figuring out who we are to each other. Some things can't be recovered. 20 years of Sunday dinners that didn't happen. But we're building forward. And that matters. As for the Caldwells, Warren and Patrice are awaiting trial on charges of forgery, fraud, and child neglect. The house on Maple Ridge Drive is under a second mortgage for the restitution order. Warren was asked to resign from his church board position and did not go quietly. Patrice, who cooperated with investigators and whose voluntary courtroom statement was considered significant by the DA's office, may receive reduced charges. Savannah has a job. First one she's ever had. I hope she's asking herself the questions that need to be asked. I see a therapist every Thursday, Dr. Coleman. She never tells me how to feel. She asks questions and gives me room to find my own answers. After 22 years of being told what to think, that kind of space feels like learning to breathe at a normal depth. Some mornings I still wake at 4:30 with my heart going fast, already running through a chore list that no longer exists. But then I look at the light through the east windows, and I remember where I am. I want to say something clearly before I close. This story is not about revenge. I know it might look that way from the outside. The courtroom, the ruling, the restitution, the criminal referral. But revenge would mean I wanted Warren to hurt the way I hurt. I don't. What I wanted was for the truth to be said out loud in a place where it had to be written down and kept. Revenge is something you light, hoping it burns someone else. Accountability is just turning on the lights so everyone can see what was already there. If you are in a family where you are managed instead of loved, where your presence is a transaction instead of a gift, where you have been taught that gratitude means silence and obedience means safety, I want you to hear this. You are not the problem. You were never the problem. The people who made you feel like a burden were carrying their own accounting, and they put it on you because you were small enough to accept it. You deserve to know your own name. You deserve a room with a window. Family is not a court decree. Family is not a signature, forged or otherwise. Family is the person who says of course when you ask for proof instead of faith. Family is the person who holds the door and never once asks you to be grateful for it. Last Sunday, Thomas and I sat on the covered porch of the little house in Decatur. He was drinking coffee. I was reading. Neither of us was talking, and it was the most comfortable silence I have ever sat in. After a while, he looked over and said, "I'm glad you're here." And I said, "Me too. My name is Nora Lily Rains. And for the first time in my life, I know exactly who that is." Thank you for staying until the end. If this story moved you, if it made you angry or hopeful, or just made you feel a little less alone, write it in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you want to hear the story of a woman who discovered that the house she grew up in wasn't even legally her family's, that video is linked in the description. I promise it is worth your time. Until next time, take care of yourselves. And if someone is still telling you that you should be grateful for being mistreated, You have permission, full and unconditional permission, to stop listening.